A final farewell. Mourners gather across the United Kingdom to say goodbye to the Queen. Plus, a closer look at which leaders from the Catholic faith attended the historic service. Marching for life. Thousands of people gather in one European nation, promising to defend the unborn. And miracle of faith. The blood of a Catholic martyr liquefies on his feast day. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, September 19th, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II is laid to rest at Windsor Castle as Britons say goodbye to a queen whose reign spanned more than 7 decades. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. Januarius. I'm Tracy Sable. Presidents and kings, princes and prime ministers gathered today for the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Thousands of mourners lined the streets while millions around the world watched the scenes from London. In his remarks, the Archbishop of Canterbury remembered the Queen's long commitment to serving others.
People of loving service are rare in any walk of life. Leaders of loving service are still rarer. But in all cases, those who serve will be loved and remembered when those who cling to power and privileges are long forgotten.
It was the first state funeral in Britain since 1965 when Winston Churchill passed away. And we go now to Windsor Alexandra Gardens, where we find Philip Crowther, affiliate reporter for the Associated Press. Philip, great to see you again. A historic day today with many remarkable scenes, including that of King Charles III leaving a handwritten note on the casket of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. That said, what were some of the other moments that really stood out?
Well, so many really. Maybe the one that the royal family will remember more than any other moment happened just a relatively short while ago behind closed doors with no cameras present. Finally, a private moment, a more intimate moment for the king, for the heir to the throne, the Prince of Wales also, and the rest of the royal family, with the actual burial of Queen Elizabeth II that happened in the St. George's Chapel inside of Windsor Castle that you can see illuminated here at night, just around an hour outside of London. That is probably the moment that the royal family will remember as the most intimate one, but there were so many others, public moments of mourning, public ceremonies that the royal family took part in. The service in Westminster Abbey, of course, that reminded us that the Queen was very much a woman of faith, but also those corteges, many of which we saw today, passing through central London, but also going up what's called the Long Walk here outside of Windsor Castle, with tens of thousands of people at least here in Windsor, together with central London, amassed on the sides of the road for everybody to be able to get at least a glimpse of that hearse here outside of Windsor Castle that was carrying Queen Elizabeth II's coffin to her final resting place here in Windsor Castle.
And that certainly was a sight to behold with those huge crowds of people. With so many people in attendance, including world leaders, I'm curious, what was security like?
Well, quite unprecedented, most definitely. As you mentioned, the first state funeral in the United States since that of, in the United Kingdom rather, since former Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill. But this was most likely a bigger security operation with so many heads of state in attendance, so many members of royal families as well, and so many soldiers taking part in these processions, 6,000 altogether. And of course, Add to that so many police officers necessary to keep things as orderly as they seemed on camera. This was an incredibly meticulously organized set of events that we saw here today during the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. We've seen police officers here in Windsor, for example, from the Greater Manchester area, in central London from Wales. They've come in from all parts of Britain to make sure this was as smooth an event as was planned for such a long time, of course. This is an event that hasn't been planned over the last 11 days. It's been years, over a decade at least, in the making.
And Philip, not much time left, but as we mark this end of an era and a new one begins, what happens next for King Charles III and this new chapter in the monarchy?
Or maybe finally a moment of respite for King Charles III. He has had to mourn in public during 11 days now, all while carrying out the ceremonial duties of a king, which in this case meant traveling to all of the capitals of the nations that make up the United Kingdom. He, of course, spent time in Scotland with the Queen having died 11 days ago at the Balmoral estate in the Highlands. He's had a lot of work to do while mourning the death of his mother. Today, again, those many processions he took part in central London, up the Long Walk here in Windsor as well. There is nothing particularly notable on his schedule for the next few days, but what you can expect to see is a first trip abroad, of course, visiting some of those countries, member countries of the Commonwealth, who were represented here by their leaders. He will want to shore up support, if you will, for the monarchy in those Commonwealth countries. That might be one of the most important things for King Charles to do, not necessarily over the next few weeks, but over the next few years, as he gets used to this job that he has been learning to do from his mother for such a long time.
Philip Crowther with the Associated Press, thank you so much. President Joe Biden flew back to Washington, D.C. today after attending the Queen's funeral. White House correspondent Owen Jensen continues our team coverage. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. President Joe Biden, traveling with the First Lady, said the Queen was decent, honorable, and all about service, and that she was the same in person as her image.
President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden arrived earlier today at Westminster Abbey for the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. The president among hundreds of heads of state and political leaders from around the world attending the service in London. Just a day earlier, President Biden paid tribute by signing a book of condolences and said the world's fortunate to have had the Queen for 70 years.
As I've told the King, she's going to be with him every step of the way, every minute, every moment. And that's a reassuring notion.
Meanwhile, Mark Frericks is free, the American contractor held hostage by the Taliban. His release coming in an exchange for a convicted Taliban drug lord. President Biden saying in a statement, bringing the negotiations that led to Mark's freedom to a successful resolution required difficult decisions, which I did not take lightly. The president and vice president are also keeping up their drumbeat in favor of abortion. The vice president tweeting, extremist Republicans in Congress will stop at nothing to chip away at a woman's right to control her own body. And the president adding, imagine the possibilities if we elect more Democrats to the Senate and keep the House, from codifying Roe v. Wade to protecting voting rights.
But pro-life supporters like the Family Research Council write, quote, President Biden seems fixated on demonizing the half of America that does not support his radical agenda. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Our Congress returns this week hoping to wrap up a final agreement to fund the government until mid-December. Democrats are also pushing for several other items, some opposed by Republicans. That list includes a $12 billion bipartisan aid package for Ukraine, $22 billion for COVID preparedness, monkeypox research and disaster relief, and federal approval for oil and gas pipelines requested by Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Republicans and some Democrats don't want permitting included. A final decision on the makeup of the resolution is expected later this week. Hurricane Fiona made landfall today over the Dominican Republic. The storm swept through Puerto Rico yesterday, causing catastrophic damage. One storm-related death is reported and nearly 1.5 million people are without electricity. Well, in Pakistan, 33 million people are affected by monsoon floods, which have left thousands homeless. While no fatalities were reported over the past 3 days, the country's death toll is now more than 1,500 since the rainy season began back in June. The criminal trial for 90-year-old Cardinal Joseph Zen in Hong Kong has been delayed. This after the judge considering the case tested positive for COVID-19. Cardinal Zen is one of several pro-democracy protesters facing charges. The Holy Father's representative in Ukraine was shot at on Saturday while delivering humanitarian aid. Cardinal Konrad Krajewski was not hurt in the shooting, which happened near a city close to the site of a damaged nuclear power plant. Separately, Russian authorities claim Ukrainian rockets killed at least 13 people today in a contested city near the border between the two countries. A gunman set fire to a Catholic church last Friday in Cameroon. They also kidnapped 5 priests, 2 religious sisters, and 2 lay people. The West African nation has been the site of a 5-year civil war, and in recent weeks, there has been a rise in the targeting of Catholic churches and the faithful. Well, a court in Sri Lanka is asking an ex-president to face charges in connection with a 2019 Easter Sunday suicide bombing that killed nearly 270 people. A complaint by a Catholic priest and worshiper accuses the former president of negligence. Mathripala Sirisena must answer why he did not name someone in his absence when radical groups were violently threatening Christians. Coming up, as the Queen is laid to rest in England, learn more about the new king and his long support of a Christian organization. Plus, the first pro-life march takes place in the U.S. since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Reported earlier today was the state funeral for Queen Elizabeth II, and among the 2,000 mourners inside of Westminster Abbey were a number of faith leaders, including some from the Catholic Church. We go now to Fiorella Nash, UK journalist and author who is based just outside of London. Fiorella, thank you so much for your time today. What more can you tell us about the state funeral, and also which Catholic leaders were present?
Well, it was very significant how different this funeral was to the last monarch's funeral. Of course, there are a lot of things that are the same, but what was most significant, this was a deeply Christian event, as one ought to expect from the funeral of the former head of the Church of England, governor of the Church of England. But there were a number of Catholic faith leaders represented, and most significantly, you had leaders from Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. You had Archbishop Cushley of St Andrews in Edinburgh, Archbishop Mark O'Toole of Cardiff, Eamon Martin of Armagh, and Cardinal Vincent Nichols played a significant role in the funeral. This is something that has not happened for hundreds of years. Our last Catholic monarch was James II, who was deposed, and of course, famously, Charles II converted to Catholicism on his deathbed. So to have a Catholic leader take such a prominent role in the Queen's funeral is something extraordinary and something that would not have happened, I think, 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah, it really is quite remarkable. Can you talk to us about the relationship between the late Queen and the Catholic Church?
She had a very cordial relationship with the Catholic Church. She met 5 popes during her lifetime. The first, of course, when she was still a princess. When she was Princess Elizabeth, she met Pius XII, which gives you some idea of the many epochs her reign covered, that she met so many different popes. But most significantly, she welcomed 2 popes onto English soil. Pope John Paul II was, like Queen Elizabeth, a trailblazer. He was the first pope ever to set foot on English soil, and she was there to welcome him. She also, of course, welcomed Pope Benedict. And the messages I'm seeing, the observations that the different popes made of Queen Elizabeth was that they had a lot of shared interests, shared concerns. They respected her dignity, her commitment to her Christian faith. So it seems that she always did have a very good relationship with the Catholic faith. She was very committed to ecumenism. She oversaw Britain becoming much more of a multicultural society, and she was very supportive of that. And I think her son, King Charles, will be very similar.
And I was going to just ask you that kind of segue into that. You know, we talk about the Queen's, about her strong Christian faith. What about King Charles III? I do know that he is a longtime supporter of a Christian organization known for helping those who face persecution. What can you tell us about that?
Yes. With Queen Elizabeth, it was always very clear her Christian faith was central to everything she did. Her sense of public duty and service. She very frequently referred to her Christian faith in her Christmas messages, for example. But I think King Charles is going to be very similar. He has already sworn an oath to protect the Protestant faith, the Church of England and the Church of Scotland. But he is also very committed to ecumenism and interfaith dialogue. He pledged a few days ago to protect faith and to keep a safe space, to protect space for all faiths in Britain. And that, of course, will mean the Catholic faith as well. The Catholic representatives were part of over 30 faith leaders who were present at that meeting. He has also been a very dedicated supporter of Aid to the Church in Need, which is a charity that was set up after the Second World War, when you had a huge number of refugees coming across into Germany initially from Eastern Europe. But of course, more recently, it hasn't just been Catholics in former communist countries, it has been Christians living in any country in the world where there is widespread persecution of Christians. And King Charles has been very strong in his support. He has met with the survivors of persecution. He has spoken passionately about the incredible courage and steadfastness of Christians in the Middle East. So that is a very good sign for the future.
Oh, Fiorella, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, in Poland's capital, some 10,000 people rallied during the country's national March for Life and Family. The motto for this year's march was, "I promise you." The reference to wedding vows was intended to remind couples of the pro-life significance of their marriage. Many renewed vows during a ceremony prior to yesterday's march. Smaller events were held in nearly 150 other cities across Poland. And for more on this story, including the pro-family challenges in Poland, visit our online partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Well, back here at home, Pennsylvania becomes the first U.S. state to hold a March for Life since June's overturning of Roe versus Wade. Participants today included a student chorus. Amen. March for Life President Jeannie Mancini was among the speakers in Harrisburg. Another was the producer and co-writer for the film Gosnell. She reminded attendees about the Philadelphia abortion provider who was convicted in 2013 for killing babies born alive. Up next, a new American bishop talks about why he was back in the classroom. Plus, the blood of a Catholic martyr liquefies and what it means on his feast day. Pope Francis invites the faithful to be creative and clever in doing good with prudence.
Non usate I beni di questo mondo solo per voi stessi.
At a Sunday address, the Holy Father said that Christians cannot be indifferent to corruption. The Pope also encouraged the faithful to be generous in using the goods of this world for those who need them the most, showing fraternal love and social fellowship. A course for the formation of new bishops has taken place at the Vatican. This year's course focused on witnessing the joy of the gospel in a time of change. The purpose is to facilitate a collegial reflection on their ministry in the present context of the Church on a synodal journey. Joining us now from Rome is Bishop Eric Pohlmeyer of the Diocese of St. Augustine in Florida. Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time today. Can you tell us more about this course and how was it structured and how many participants were there?
We had 180 bishops from around the world. They told us today there were 24 countries represented. We had a small group gathering at one point in 5 different languages. And so we gathered together for a week of prayer and lectures and reflection together, and then ended today with the chance to meet the Holy Father.
Yeah, and speaking of that chance to meet the Holy Father, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience?
Well, it was a profound experience. We started the morning with a gathering for Mass in St. Peter's, a Mass celebrated by Cardinal Ouellet, and then we made our way to the room where the Holy Father would come, and they got us situated, and then the Holy Father entered the room and immediately began calling for questions, asking the bishops from around the world to share their thoughts, ask questions, and they would speak in their language, and he would respond in Italian, and then we all had the chance to go up and greet him individually. Some people offered him gifts, everyone asked him for prayer, and we had the chance to connect. So the personal part of that experience was that as a bishop, as a successor of the apostles, this is a coming together with all of the apostles to reflect together on the work that we're doing in the missions around the world.
What an incredible experience. I'm curious, what did you learn in particular that you feel that you'll take with you when you come back to the U.S.?
I'd say on a personal note, what I learned was the deeper sense of the collegiality of being a bishop. So I'm only about 7 weeks into being a bishop, and as I've reflected on what it means to be a bishop, that sense that the bishop represents unity with the church, that's captured by the fact that when I come together with these other bishops, we as a global church are united with each other. And so that personal sense that I represent the unity that Christ desires for his church along with fellow Catholics around the world. And in terms of my ministry as a bishop, we reflected on the Holy Father's emphasis on synodality and the need to approach the decisions that we make, the work of the church, from a posture of listening, of trying to engage people and understand better their experience so that what we share with them about the gospel can find resonance in their hearts.
And finally, before I let you go, would you mind telling us a little bit about your diocese in Florida?
So the Diocese of St. Augustine, now my new home, is about 150,000 Catholics in 17 counties of northeastern Florida. And certainly the most powerful part for me as a new bishop coming into that place is the historic reality of Mass being celebrated in 1565 and having a continuous community of faith since that time. So part of a deep historic reality of faith being lived, overcoming challenges, and pursuing the call of the Lord of many faithful.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and sharing all of this with us. We appreciate it. God bless you. Well, finally tonight, today is the feast of St. Januarius, an early Christian bishop and martyr. To mark his feast, some 2,000 people attended Mass today to witness the liquefaction of his blood. The saint is known as San Gennaro in Naples, where he is the patron saint. The Archbishop of Naples urged the faithful to see in the liquefaction a sign that crime and corruption are conquered by goodness, beauty, and love. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We leave you tonight with more from the Queen's funeral today. Good night and God bless.